like that tie, Henry.
I appreciate it. That tie is special to me actually. It's funny you ask about that. That's actually that's a photo from my wedding.
Oh,
Just
really?
like the most professional photos I have. Yeah, and that tie is made out of the same material that my wife's oh god, I don't remember what the outfit is called, but her like traditional Malaysian outfit is made out of, and so they just had some extra material to make the tie for me, and I think it works well. I never get another chance to wear it, but
I well, that that's a really awesome story, actually. Well, you have to do another headshot with the tie.
I will. I will. If I ever update that, I'll do that. Or if I do like an AI generated thing, I'll give him reference photos with the tie for sure. It wasn't
So I
cheap.
don't.
I gotta make sure I
I,
get use out of it.
I can't stand wearing ties personally, but anyway.
Yeah, it kills me as well. But some occasions call for it.
So we were together last week for most of the week, actually, down in Atlanta for ChannelCon, um,
I
and
know.
we
They finally let us leave the house. Get out a little bit.
yeah, we were just talking in the green room about how you work remote, right? I work in an office by myself. It's a dedicated office, but like my team's all over the place. But hey, before we get lost, welcome everyone to the MSP Cyber Roundtable. Thanks for coming again. We got Henry Zhang here from Senteon. They're super deep into the endpoint hardening space. We'll talk more about that later. I had to do the intro. Today, later on, we're going to talk about browser extension hardening and why you should be worried about browser extensions, the things that can go wrong. We're also going to talk about some GIAC certifications. But before we get deeper into that techie stuff, we just spent the week in ChannelCon. That was not my first opportunity to meet you, but it was really great spending the week together.
It was, yeah, and that
Yeah,
was my first channel con too. So first time coming out. Atlanta's a little bit of a home base for us, so it wasn't unfamiliar territory, but it was definitely fun to go to channel con, sort of make face with you guys, and just see how they run things there because it's a little different, I think, than a lot of the other conferences that we've been to.
yeah, and I didn't understand it until I really got involved with CompTIA, but it's really like the industry's town square. Like all of us vendors are like, we're all in 10 by 10 booths. You got Dell right next to Fort Mesa, and we both got 10 by 10s. Um, and
Give you that
CompTIA really tries
equality.
to level the playing field there, and
Yeah.
you guys had your 10 by 10. But also, it's really not about the vendors, right? There's a lot of great education for the service provider community there, and it's not like this two-tier system at some events where you have the exhibitors that are sort of another class and they're separate
Mhm.
from the attendees, right? Everyone's sort of sharing the space.
Yeah, no, that's for
So
sure. I mean, we had Zach over from my team give a presentation over the second day of ChannelCon on some of the hardening stuff. I don't know if you were allowed to, or if you had the chance to attend, but he was complaining about that one because I think we were really explicit on following their rules, like we're not plugging our company, strictly educational, all that stuff. And he got out of the end of it, and people were like, "Yeah, other people plug their companies all the time." Uh, so sounds like we were
well,
a little too goody two shoes on that one.
yeah, it's like you can plug, but you can't plug too hard. As long as the meat of the content is general, you can tell people what you do and why you're great. But I think people sometimes complain, and if people complain that you were too selly,
That's when
you,
you got a
you won't get
problem.
you won't get that slot again.
That makes sense. Well, hopefully we'll be back next year, and maybe next time Zach can give a little bit of a small thing at the end. We'll see.
All right. Well, before we jump into certification lectures, Henry, I don't know. Like you've been on the show before, but I don't know that we've ever done what brought you like your personal journey in the IT industry. And I would love to hear like the not even the Senteon nucleating story, right? Like what positioned you to even be able to take that step into Senteon? Like where did your career start? What were the tribulations along the way where how did you get started in security, man? Like this is like a geeky space.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like whenever I tell a story, it's always just it's an accident more so than anything else. So I went to high school for I had a magnet program in high school for computer science, and so I had a basis there for like learning the code, sort of the basics of net, taught us little SQL things like that, and I didn't really enjoy any of it. Um, I grew up in a family where both my parents work in IT, so tech was something that was pretty close to home as far as that was concerned. So I knew I wanted to do something technical. Didn't like coding, and so when I was going to college, I went around looking for different programs that were sort of tangentially related, networking, IT, things like that. And as it so happened, I found that Purdue University had a program for cybersecurity, and I thought that was really interesting. So I applied to the relevant college for that. And after I got accepted, I went to attend. I actually learned that their cybersecurity program is a graduate program, or it's like a graduate undergrad like mixed thing, but you have to apply to get into it. And I sort of like applied to like the wrong program. It was a whole thing, but they ended up rolling out a full undergrad cybersecurity program my second year there, so I transferred into it from the networking track, and that was sort of how I got my start. I want to say. Uh, and had some great professors there. Shout out to Nicole Hans, who pretty much taught me everything that I know, security related. And when I was there, did a couple internships, had the opportunity to go out to the middle of the cornfields in Illinois and see how a Fortune 500 like Archer Daniels Midland runs their cybersecurity. Working with our IT vulnerability management team, had the great joy of setting up SharePoint workflows, um, calling people about security things, getting reported back to the security team as phishing, which was a great case study. Not so great for me because I had to deal with that, but that was my first opportunity, I think, to work in an actual security environment. After that, I did a couple internships over at Cisco, worked in their ATA SOC, learned from a lot of guys that are way smarter than me. And then after that, 2 summers after I graduated, I thought about going to industry. I think I was looking at opportunities with Darktrace, going back to Cisco, things like that. And then I decided if I was going to start something and start a company, I should do it now. And so um, pulled together some people that I knew and that I enjoyed working with, and we got this started back then, 2019. A couple pivots to get to where we are, but we got there eventually.
Well, that's super interesting. It's interesting that you label that as accidental because I mean, clearly there's like dice rolls and luck in everyone's career, right? But that actually sounds like a pretty direct, intentional journey
So
compared to me and everyone else of my age who ended up in cyber. Like it was really like because cyber didn't exist. Like
yeah, that's true.
we really tripped over it, right? As it grew.
I say accidental because Purdue was not my first choice going to college, and I definitely didn't accidentally get myself rejected from every other college I applied to, and that ended up being the only option I had if I wanted to be not in the same state. And so that's the part I guess I would say is accidental. Is it wasn't my first choice.
Well, I understand that the program there is pretty good, and further attestation because they launched you. But all right, before we get into hardening and stuff like that, and we'll talk about Senteon a little bit later. Let's jump in and talk about this thing we're talking about right now in more detail, like the qualification. How do you get into security? And your qualification was university track. You went through a full
Yeah,
grad program, right? Um, and then was it not?
just undergrad.
It
Yeah,
was
just
undergrad.
undergrad.
Okay,
Yeah,
you went through an undergrad program and then into internship, right? Directly in
right.
cyber. Um, but other people take different tracks, and if you don't have that formalized introduction to cybersecurity, you're in someplace else in IT, or maybe you're looking at an alternative to school, or maybe you're going through school, but you're looking for that extra credibility that says that you've got practical experience. And I know that internship was probably really useful there for you.
Really.
People look at certifications, right? Because it says on the tin this person can do X, Y, or Z job function. Last week we talked about ISC squared certifications and CompTIA certifications on the last couple of weeks. Today we're going to talk about GIAC. So with that, here we go. So little introduction here to GIAC. They've been around a long time. Believe it or not, there's this polarizing certification um, uh, like system in the security industry where people are either really into the practical certifications or the knowledge based or experience based certifications.
Mhm.
I happen to have ISC squared's CISSP, which does require a 5 year track record in
5 years,
security
right?
and a
Yeah.
bunch of knowledge. And the reason I went after that one is it's the most well known cybersecurity credential in the world. And in particular, the most well known outside cybersecurity. People say, oh, I'm looking for a CISO. What certification should that person have? They look at CISSP and they find a CISSP like me. And that's how they shop when they're not cyber experts. But when you are running a cybersecurity team, you sometimes want more specific practical skills, and you want to know people don't just have the book knowledge, but they have the practical knowledge. And GIAC is really the leader there. Um, Everyone who's ever passed one of these exams loves to tell everyone else who
That
hasn't
they pass these exams, yeah.
that they not just that they passed these exams, but that their certification was harder than your certification. And I think they're right because GIAC has not just the book knowledge, but you actually have to have a demonstrated applied knowledge, and it's measured in a lab scenario, similar to the way Cisco does their lab
Yeah.
exercises. Now, the downside of these GIAC certifications is if you're not a security geek, you've probably never heard of them before, which is a problem. But if you're going into a dedicated InfoSec environment, those InfoSec leaders, not only are they going to respect GIAC, but they're going to be actively seeking out those certifications. So, just to break down a little bit more what we're saying into a little like more clear abstraction. The GSE is the most well-known GIAC certification, and to become a GIAC security expert, you have to collect a number of practitioner certifications, which are applied. They're applied. They're in a lab. You have to demonstrate a collection of skills. You also have to acquire knowledge, and then there's the step along the path, the GIAC security professional certification. Neither, the GSP is also not easy, but the GSE is really seen as like the hardest
The gold
nut to
standard,
crack
yeah.
in the certification industry. And Henry, I don't know if you've run across anyone that's gone through that GSE crucible, but it's
I had the opportunity to meet some people that had done it over at Cisco, and it was yeah, it's pretty brutal. I mean, from what I recall with GX programs, not only do you have to be able to pass exams, you're like required to take their trainings before they'll even let you take the exams, right? And I think those are like a couple weeks dedicated out in Vegas, but they're like training programs that you got to do. So funny you mentioned actually that they were like maybe less well known than the CISSP or even like the CompTIA certifications. Because when I was first getting into cyber and learning about important certs, I think the order I learned about them in was actually CompTIA, GIAC, and then CISSP. So for
yeah,
me, these were always sort of like the first gold standard that I've heard of when it came to practical knowledge in security.
yeah, and I will probably never go down that journey pathway. Although I'm sure with
No,
a
you don't want a GIAC?
I at an earlier moment in my career, I probably would have or should have gone down that road. But you have to, it's a lot of. You're right. It's the in person training. You also have to do the in person labs, and it can get expensive if you take them too early because if you fail these labs, you have to just do them again, and they're at great cost.
Well, they'll
So
let you do the practice tests at a low price of $3.99.
all right. We'll dig it a little bit more, then we can move on here. So, because the GSE is well known as like the most difficult certification to get, there is that stop along the way that is usable, and it's a great badge to wear if you're trying to get a job, and that's the GSP, which is also very difficult, right? Because you need three practitioner labs in your portfolio, and you need the and you also need the two knowledge certifications. And then as you move beyond that towards your GSE, right, you've got to add in three more practitioners, two more applied knowledges, right? So I mean, you could for a GSP just focus on incident incident management, or just focus in on dealing with vulnerabilities and risk, right? But if you're trying to seek out that GSE certification, they're really looking for that rounded experience across many domains.
Yeah.
So, in any case, some people love to argue over why the CISSP is harder or easier than the GSE. But I think these days, now that the CISSP exam is now only, it's now only 2 or 3 hours. It used to be a 6-hour exam. The GSE is clearly the hardest pathway into certification in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what you value, like you said too, right? Because technically, you could be a GSE and not have worked an hour of industry in your life as long as you're really good at doing the exams. But the CISSP is a little different because they do require you to have that industry knowledge first.
The industry knowledge, and someone's got to sign off. And
They do.
I think sometimes it's easy to get someone to sign off on your security knowledge, but if you're really starting out in the industry, you're fresh out of school, it is really hard to find someone that's going to attest to, oh yeah, you've got 5 years of experience. No, you can study that test and even pass it, but you won't be given your badge until you get 5 years under your belt.
How does that work? Like if you run your own business, like in my case, who the hell is supposed to sign off on mine? I was like, yeah, I've been doing this for 5 years. I want to get my
it's anyone who's worked. So, Henry, I would be happy if you want to go get your CISSP. I would be happy to endorse you.
I'll keep it in mind, man.
Yeah, so someone just writes a letter, a recommendation, and it gets attached into your app.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
They've also got to have a CISSP. It's like this funny little club.
Oh, it's a club.
Yeah. All right. The practitioner exams, these are, these are the I'm just reading from the slide, which is really dense here, right? But these are the hands-on stuff, right? And then the
labs.
Yeah, and then the knowledge is really, I mean, no, the applied knowledge are the labs. So I apologize for that. The practitioners are the knowledge that you could sort of memorize your way through. Although I'll tell you, with any of these high-end expert level certs, I think some people argue that they're memorization exercises, but in my experience, getting to a pass on any of these expert level certifications, you can't get there. You can't get there with memorization. I've seen a lot of people study their hearts out, really great students, and they don't make it because the difference between the correct answer and a semi-correct answer, is applied real world experience.
Makes sense.
All right, so we got a topic of the day here. If anyone wants to throw out their browser security questions or browser extension questions, throw them into the chat, and we got
browser extensions, man. All right.
Rafi says his cousin signed off on him 13 years ago. My question to you, Rafi, is did your cousin actually observe any of your security experience? Presumably he's a good judge, right?
I would hope so, but it's fine. Yeah. As far as Rafi's concerned, if he needed somebody to sign off it today, I would definitely sign off for him, except for the fact they wouldn't let me because I don't have my CISSP either, but I would do it.
Yeah, you can harden 1 million computers, but you can't self-attest
your CISSP. Nope.
Yeah. All right, so look, this is an issue with many of the partners that we onboard. This is like a thing that they're surprised about. They've got EDR, they've got like MDR response services, they've got their SIM, their SOC, and their endpoint security, and they're using like whatever type of machine hardening technology that they're using, and it escapes. They think they've locked down admin credentials too, right? And it escapes them that they haven't locked down the browser, right? And there's many things to worry about in locking down browser security, but the biggest, most dangerous thing are those extensions, right? We've got like the coupon clippers, right?
Those are good ones, like Honey.
Yeah, the Honey. Yeah, it sends all your. Actually, I think they may have responded to some critique over the years, and it's a little less dangerous than it used to be. But the reality is these are not high security companies. Your browser traffic and the contents of web pages, even, right, is being sent to these other companies.
Yeah, I mean your cookies, your sessions, all of the stuff that you do on your browser. If you got your You
They
mouse
could
over
just
your email,
hijack
they just grab all that stuff.
the whole session. And then there's like what we've got like Grammarly, right? We've got like the ones that are literally like observing what you're typing into your
The free
keyboard.
keylogger.
Yeah, yeah, the freaky loggers. What other types of like really common extensions do you see that like let's just forget the fact that some of these are really scary and nefarious. Like, what are the normalish ones that people install and don't think too hard about?
I mean, password managers are a common one these days. Ad blockers, and I see some of the comments coming in. People using like Dark Reader. They mention ad blockers. I know guys on my team that are using Grammarly. Hope the guy they're using the right one and not some weird side-loaded one they found. Um, I actually haven't used Dark Reader personally, so I don't know for sure how good it is, but I'm gonna assume that it's pretty good considering how common it is. You know, we got a lot of people chiming in with different ones they use. Um, but I'd say those are the most common ones. I also use one. What's the name of this thing? It's called. I don't know what this thing is called. Forest. That's what's called. I don't know if you've used this one before, but it's like a focus tool. So I can start planting a tree, and the longer I'm focused on what I'm working on, the more the tree grows. So
Oh, that's a
that's a
great
fun
little
one.
reward system there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of data they're pulling from me for that, but
Well,
yeah,
I'm gonna dox myself here, and let me see. Can I share my own screen that I'm currently talking in? I
you're gonna
think
show us your 50 extensions you're using.
I'm gonna show off my extensions here. So so I'm using of course the pop-ups don't show up. All right.
You got uBlock, is that HubSpot next to it? I didn't
Yeah,
recognize
well,
that third one.
I gotta do the entire screen here. So I've got Note Taker, right, which apparently has full access to the site, right? The
Perfectly
Google
fine.
Keep, right?
Definitely not an issue.
Um, I've got the Thailand API tester, has full access to this site. I've got uBlock Origin. I've got a HubSpot plugin, right? Now I've got a HubSpot
Few
sales
HubSpot
plugin.
plugins, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a
Surf?
I've got a creepy data plugin, although it doesn't need special access. Like these extensions down below, it's worth noting, no access needed. They can't actually see anything on this
But
website.
that's gonna be a tab by tab thing, right? Depending on what site you're on.
It does. It depends on what site. So as an example, Surfy has access to LinkedIn, but nothing else, right? Um, and then I've got HubSpot, which will ask for access when it needs it, right? Um, and then I've got these other scary extensions. Now our organization went through a vetting process with every single one of these extensions, and we have hardening built in. Like I even as a owner of the company, I can't just easily add an extension. I have to request
Oh,
the extension.
I know what that's like.
I have to then go to a secure, even though I also happen to have super user access. After I've requested the extension, I then have to go to a super user console and I have to approve it, right? And presumably there's a
Ideally,
vetting
somebody else is
process.
approving yours. Now you're not
Yeah,
approving your own,
there
but
should
yeah.
there should be a vetting process there. I shouldn't be approving my own. And then I can install that. But I think a lot of companies don't have that system in place, and we'll talk more about what how that system should function in a moment. But I think it's true that most organizations don't have that process in place, and people install all sorts of stuff. And my company uses extensions. I presume you just named a few you use, right? And we're both pretty security conscious people. And yeah, there's some scary extensions out there. And Eli just asked a really great question. How do you feel about ad blockers, right? Like,
Yeah, that one's a tough one because if you take them at their word of mouth, they're just here to do a good thing and work off donations. Um, and I mean, I got a lot of those questions coming about ad blockers, and I think, especially if we're working off Chrome these days, it's kind of necessary to have a good ad blocker on it, just because a lot of that malware you're going to end up getting is going to be through the ads. But it
yeah,
is tough to figure out outside of like word of mouth what other people are using, which ones are good, right? So I definitely vouch for uBlock Origin because that's what we use. Um, but I think you're using the same one there. Uh, but I know that's been a thing that's bounced on a lot. Like we used to go from one ad blocker that was good, and then they decided getting donations weren't enough, and they turned to the dark side, and we'd hop to the next one and hop to the next one.
And it's a problem as a small software developer that doesn't have a solid revenue model, right? Sometimes the only revenue model you have when you've created an extension is to build up an audience and then sell the extension to someone that's going to monetize it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and it doesn't matter that it's a security extension. Some people think of ad blockers. I think of it as a security extension. I'm not really looking to block the ads. I'm looking to keep the website safe.
Yeah.
Um, and I think there's the same thing's true of VPNs, right? Where there's a bunch of creepy VPNs out there that market themselves as being security.
Yeah, VPNs are a different topic though, because VPN is not a security tool, and that's a hill I will die
Well, but
on.
they market themselves as a
They do,
security
but they're not
tool,
security
and
tools.
yeah, and users think they are, right? So and ad blockers are doing the same thing, and some of the most popular ad blockers are pretty creepy, right? So I think in answer to the question here, I think ad blockers are important, and I think companies need to make them available. I think it's also important that the company vets one or two ad blockers, um, and makes only those available and gives users instructions. And I'm going to tell you, uBlock Origin, I trust it a lot, Henry. But have you ever trained a non-technical user to use uBlock Origin? It's pretty challenging.
Honestly, I haven't. I thought you just install it and turn it on. No, like what?
You're spoken like a true geek, right? But when the website doesn't function properly, like you're like, oh, that must be uBlock, and you go in there and you're like, okay, I got to turn off and users don't like it doesn't occur to them that there's this blocker that might block a thing they need on the page, right?
Yeah.
Um,
But no, I would agree. I think ad blocker should come standard as part of sort of like the business software that is being loaded onto somebody's computer. And then Patrick, a little bit too. Eli asked if there was a good master list of safe extensions, which I thought was a funny question because in theory that should be like the Google Web Store or whatever standard store you're utilizing to get those extensions from. The issue with those obviously is like when you've got people loading malicious extensions onto there that are like sharing names like uBlock Origin versus uBlock Origins with an S and downloading the wrong one. Um, so yes and no, I would say that generally for the most part, vendors are getting better. Is it right? Marketplaces maybe are getting better at vetting out malicious software and getting rid of them quickly. But still better to do your own diligence on those things. Because as far as I'm aware, nobody's maintaining like a perfect master list just because it's so easy to spoof those if somebody buys out a company that was on that master list and then starts using to push malware, or they use the same name issue. That's tough to vet for, I think. You just gotta do
yeah,
your
and
own diligence in each one.
I've got an even uglier answer that's very similar, which is unfortunately, not only is there not a master list, the real answer is you need to treat those extensions the same way you would treat any other application that's installed on that PC. Um, and we've all hopefully taken admin rights away from our users and not given them the ability to install software because we know why that's a bad idea. And we need to be thinking that way about extensions too for the browser, even though the OS doesn't allow us to do that. We need a special browser profile to do that, and we should be treating every single one of those extension offers to the same standard we would treat someone who writes software that installs on our PC in any other fashion. And so that means, um, is this a company or is this a person, right? With very few exceptions, I would say I don't think individual authors should be trusted, with very few extensions. There's a few, like the uBlock Origin is an example of an exception because while that's an individual unincorporated author, it is an open source project. It has a really high quality reputation, right? Um, but for the most part, anything that's written, anything that's created by an individual is highly suspect because, really, like as an individual, how secure can that individual be? I know it's really difficult for me to protect my own computer, and some people would consider me a security professional. I need a team at Fort Mesa to keep our infrastructure safe. It is really difficult as an individual to do that. So if you're an individual writing an extension, it's really difficult to keep your supply chain safe, even if you're a trustworthy person. And then if it is a company, right, it's the same list of things. Can we trust that this company is going to update their software? Can we trust that we are not the product and they're not going to steal our information, right? Um, can we trust that they have a relationship with us contractually or in some other way where if there's a security problem, that it's going to be disclosed to us, right? And these are all the same things we look for any software that we install on our computers. I don't know if you want to add anything to that list there, Henry,
No, I
but
mean, I think you hit it about right on the head, right? And it's I feel like touches on that idea of like the problem with open source versus closed source stuff too, where open source has its advantages, but one of the big ones they miss out on is having that dedicated support team or that dedicated say security and knowing that if something does happen to that software to that company, you're going to be notified.
yeah,
Even if you
yeah,
are
the
shooting in the
notification.
dark outside of it.
Yeah. And you don't necessarily need to have a contract with like so I have this and I do happen to have a contract with Google, right? But if it's a big tech company, right, and they have a reputation for security operations and disclosures, right, you can treat the software developed by that company with whatever reputation that company has earned, right? And big tech has its hierarchy. I think there's a few of those big tech vendors that we can basically trust to build secure software or as secure as as possible in the industry. There's a couple other big tech companies that you might want to question what they're doing with our data, right? And just apply that to the extensions.
Yeah.
So that's like the why we should be fearful, but like I think a lot of people don't realize, that this is even possible to control or how to do that in process. There's a few different ways to do it, but ultimately we're talking about stopping people from installing things they shouldn't install, and then allowing them to install things that they should install. And Henry, I know that you guys have invested in this browser profile area a little bit, so you could probably talk more knowledgeably about that. What are the options that exist out in the world for keeping this safe?
Yeah, I mean, like all things, it's going to be security in layers, right? You probably want to start first thing training on people that work in your organization, helping them understand again the risk of malicious browser extensions, what they can actually do, and then starting from there, how they can vet the stuff they're trying to do, right? So, don't sideload extensions, pull them from the actual store, and if they're not on the formal store, don't install them. And then when you're going to the store, verifying that you're getting the right one, verify that what you're trying to install is in fact what you're looking for, right? Then from there you can move upstream a little bit and talk about the things that we could be doing to help our users ensure that they're installing the right things. That's all browser hardening, right? So setting up a whitelist to ensure that you have a list of formally accepted extensions so they can't find the wrong one and install that, and that they know what is pre-approved. Making sure that your approval process for adding new extensions to that whitelist is good. Doing verification, looking over, if possible, the source code, things like that is important. And then, ensuring that all of the controls that surround things like browser extensions are turned on, right? So ensure that external extensions, so those side-loaded ones, can't be installed in the first place. Ensure that different extension types are put into consideration. So based on whether it's an extension, a hosted app, or platform app, or maybe even a theme, those are all different types of extensions, and you could restrict access to those, right? Like formally speaking, themes are probably not the most important thing to be allowing your users to use. Although in that case, maybe Dark Reader is your meet in the middle point where you let them use Dark Reader if they don't get to use themes. But doing all those things, I think, is important for just ensuring that browser extensions don't give you a headache 2 or 3 months down the road.
So there's a little bit of a cultural hurdle to go through what you just talked about
Isn't
because
there always?
and Zach's chiming in here again. Zach, aren't you on a plane? I think I remember that story.
No, he's not traveling today, but he was
Okay.
he's running another meeting. We can
Okay.
get him in here, talk about him if he wants.
No, it's okay. Oh, he's got all this memorized. Yeah. So you know, Yes. Okay. Clearly, there's other stuff in the browser we need to harden, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Extensions are, yeah, it's just a few of the settings, but honestly, this is really hard for people to operationalize. For the same reason, it's hard to operationalize the rest of browser hardening. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of geeks watching this are going to be pretty uncomfortable with the fact that their favorite browser is maybe not good for business. I mean, there's this basic concept in InfoSec, which is that um, browsers should be approved and maintained by the company like any other software. And the idea that your people in your organization should be able to collect like Chrome and Firefox and Safari and Brave and whatever else all on one machine, like that's it's really not maintainable from a security perspective to try to harden all those browsers in one company, right? So before
They
you can
should
even embark
fall back.
in the extension game, you need to like as a company say like, look, we're going to support this browser and this browser, or just this browser. You could do your personal stuff on that browser, but we're going to lock that down too, right? I mean, that is really. I, should we just get Zach in here?
So I was saying you could bring him in here. He man has a lot to say all the time.
Why don't you pop him the link, Henry?
Sure. And he can get that. It should be on my calendar, Zach. You can
Okay. Find the link.
fill that in.
Find the link, Zach.
To drag you in here. But no, you're absolutely right, and that's why I'm a big proponent of moving everybody back to Internet Explorer. It's consistent. Nothing's gonna work on it, including your own business applications. You can guarantee that you'll be breached within 3 to 4 weeks. So you've got consistency on expectation of when things are gonna go wrong, right? I mean, what more can you
All
ask
right,
for a browser?
he's joking, guys. He's joking. But I mean, really, the companies do need to say something about this, right? And it's you can provide your users options, but not unlimited options. It's the number of options that you can sustain as a security infrastructure department, right? Like,
Yeah,
what if you don't have the ability to harden someone's favorite browser? Maybe that shouldn't be authorized software, right? So
maybe so. Yeah, I mean that's something that we've been trying to tackle on,
there he
right? Because
is.
like,
There he
hey, there
is.
he is.
Okay, come on.
Uh,
He's here.
a lot of the browsers actually make it pretty easy for you to do it. Firefox is just a CFG file you have to edit. Chrome straight up has group policy benchmarks that you can utilize, and then yeah, I mean once you get to Chromium though and like Brave and things like that, it definitely gets a little more sketchy.
What
As far as
what are we
ensuring
missing
those
here,
managed.
Zach? I know you've been saving it up, right?
Oh man, I was just hoping to be a watcher and learn a little bit something here. I mean, I'm always just talking about settings and stuff. So hearing the actual stories and the use cases from Henry, I think is a lot more exciting to the audience.
Yeah, you're a proponent of Internet Explorer too, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
Well-
huge. So I want to also note if you haven't looked at some of the new recommendations or some of the not so new recommendations, Internet Explorer is now recommended to be disabled as a standalone browser, right? So CIS has officially put that into their documentation. So please do that as well.
Yeah, don't use IE.
It's a standalone here.
I was looking at this infographic about the Irish potato famine yesterday. Okay. And can I just stay with me for a second? They're talking about how, that it was caused by a lack of genetic diversity, right? Everyone's starting to use the same browser. And there's a lack of diversity. We're all on these WebKit based or Chromium based browsers, right? There is some concern about that. Some people, particularly the geekiest people in the world, they say, "Oh, I want to use Brave or I want to use Firefox because they're on like this other code base, and Google has all those security vulnerabilities, and I'm over here and I'm not a target."
But
But
they
the
say that
reality
about
is,
Brave. Brave's a Chromium browser.
people have all
It's
sorts
also
of
WebKit.
people think
Marketing.
that their favorite browser is, of course, the best one, right? For any number of rationalizations. But the reality is, like, we need to maintain these things like any other part of a secure infrastructure, right? And I know, Zach, the reason I wanted to bring you in here, right, is you're right. It goes way beyond extensions because, I mean, maybe you could name drop what are some of these other things that like are really overlooked here in terms of browser hardening that are totally.
I mean, one thing that's not overlooked, and I say this in almost every single one of our sales presentations at Senteon is, hey, do you want your end client saving their password to the browser? And everyone's like, oh no, that's the number one thing. That's not what I want to happen. And you're right. Like that is one thing, right? The browser security and password storage isn't as up to par as a proper password manager. But my response to them is exactly what I already put in the comment. That is one setting of well over 100 recommendations from CIS. So that's really the icebreaker, I think, for a lot of people into this world. But some other examples, and a lot of these will relate to preventing a phish from being successful. So like if you click on an executable or download, you have to define the path before it actually triggers, right? So it has that extra click before doing something. Not storing payment information or not allowing websites to pull browser saved payment information if you do use that. So there's a lot of granularities in these settings that people don't think about because they're not sexy. I mean, even password storage isn't sexy, but we still talk about that. But there's so much more. And I think we're doing a good job in this webinar as well, just bringing attention to it.
It's a good caveat to mention for browser extensions too. As long as you're doing the right thing too on the other things, then you can sort of limit the exposure that an extension has as well. So if you do end up with a malicious extension, if you're not storing that password information, they could probably still grab it from your session if you log in while it's loaded.
Yeah.
At least you're not going to really get like historical things, right?
Well, I think even the persistence is a setting. Once you close the browser, it won't allow background apps to be running or anything, or background websites to, like, that's another setting. If you allow everything to be running after it's closed, it just exists. And that's a setting you need to turn on for that to happen.
Yep. Hey, are you guys aware that permission creep's also a problem? That there are sometimes, like, and we talked about it a moment ago, like someone could have this great extension, it could get sold off, right? And one of the things about, you're not just approving a browser extension, you're also typically approving the permissions that that extension has, and even the version of that extension. And if you can configure it so that if there's permission creep, actually that extension is not going to upgrade and get those new permissions, right? The admin would have to go in there and approve the new permission scope.
The issue with extensions is that it's still not very well defined as far as browsers are concerned. So most likely, if something does become malicious, it doesn't need any more permissions than it already has. It can already do everything, right?
It can be. It depends on what those original permissions were, right? Like I was just, Zach, you may have missed this. I would just dox my own extension list here.
Nice.
And a bunch of them don't really have any permissions, right? And so they're relatively low risk. They're things like that extend the browser in ways that don't give access to the session, the browser, history or whatever. And those are things that even if that app became malicious, right? We're a Google shop, right? So our browser hardening would not allow that extension to acquire access to the local web page because as an admin, we didn't approve that. So, I mean, that is the type of thing you can do, and it's the type of thing we should all be doing. None of us should be using unsecured browsers, right? We should always be using something that's been locked down and hardened in the same way that we harden our desktops. And I know that some of the EDR software does extend into the browser these days, and you guys have extended some of your hardening tactics to the browser as well. And I don't know, is it worth just talking a little bit about like some of the good work that you guys have been doing and what that fight's been like?
Oh, way to tee up the loud guy in the comments.
No, Henry, talk about it. I mean, EDRs are trying to really, I mean, it's every security vendor, especially the big ones, are looking for more ways to increase their revenue streams, add additional functionality, and configuration management is one of those paths. Because, I mean, we talk about CIS in this series quite often, right? Security configuration management is control 4, or otherwise known as priority number 4. It's pretty high in the list. So it makes sense that EDRs want to do this for a few reasons, right? By having a hardened lockdown system where, anomaly behavior is more difficult to happen from the actual true end user, the right user of that device, then it's going to make those anomaly behaviors easier to pick up, right? They have less control. The behavior's easier for the EDR to stop. So it makes sense them wanting to go this way. I don't know about their success or anything on that note. I don't know, Henry, you got some input on that?
Not more than
I've
you
got
do,
thoughts.
honestly. Yeah, go ahead, man.
Well, I think like many of these non-specialist, like when you have a tool that's like its core value is in one area, and then you add a bunch of these other features to it, right? You're not going to end with the same depth of ability. And I know, as an example, even the Microsoft tooling for systems management, right? you cannot just apply CIS baselines using that Microsoft tooling without writing some crazy scripts and policies, right? And the policy configure. I've tried doing it manually, and I don't know if anyone's. I'm sure you guys have, but I don't know if anyone's watching has tried to do this stuff manually. I mean, you got to look up these ID numbers in some dictionary that Microsoft publishes in like a hidden website, and then you got to like add all of the values manually. There's not even any like settings boxes to click on for some of this stuff. So I think having a dedicated hardening tool, because hardening is important, makes sense, or at least a tool that really that's a comprehensive offering and not a tool that does like a tiny little hardening thing on the side. Like, extension lockdown is one thing, but we also want to know, hey, our upgrades approved, our permission scopes approved. What are all those? You said 120 settings that are part of the CIS
on an
baseline?
Edge, and there's another 100 on a Chrome, and I don't know offhand how many in Firefox.
So around the same as Chrome.
Yeah, so that's a lot to keep track of, right? And if you're like an EDR tool and you're just adding like an extra screen for browser hardening, you've probably added like 5 or 10 of those things, right? Not really getting people to that hardened state. So, but in any case, you guys released a product for this, but that's relatively new, right? I mean, that was a new launch. When did you guys launch that offering?
So we just put in some updates for our baselines last month.
Last month. So that's
July,
that's
yeah. So we've got a couple other things to add to that and to flesh this out a little bit more. So that's something we're still working on too, and that's always a fun thing to have to continually test those settings and go back and forth and figure out why they don't work, or maybe why they don't work the way people say they do. It's part of the job.
Well, give our audience the Senteon pitch. What do you go stand on the stump for a moment here, Henry? You want to jump up on that stump?
You want me to jump on the stump?
Yeah,
got it, bro.
I've heard Zach's before.
I mean, mine's just like a simplified version of Zach's. No, but
Okay,
Senteon is
let's do
entirely focused on doing endpoint hardening. So we're looking at workstations, servers, and now with this year rolling around, we're looking at browsers as well. So we're looking at all the different configurations based on the CIS benchmarks, which I think at this point amounts to like just shy of 2,000 configurations we're looking at across all three of those platforms. And our solution is just designed to help you look at them from a security perspective, right? So it's not just about looking at it from an IT mindset, which I think has been what the traditional problem has been. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But these days, it's all about ensuring that things are applied properly, they remain applied, and they're not changing without our knowledge, and that everything is actually getting pushed across the board. So those are some of the core tenets for what we do and how we're trying to structure our solution, help companies ensure that their configurations and their baselines do actually get maintained over time.
And I want you really hit the mark there. That was like sex on a stick to a security guy, I got to say. And I want to ask Zach about some of the value that your partners have been receiving from this. Before we go into that, you went past something really fast that I'm not sure everyone watching understands, which is those CIS benchmarks. So that is like the hardening guide for Windows, right? For Mac, for Linux, for SQL Server, right? For browsers, right? There's really not another hardening guide, and governments and large organizations all over the planet have been using these hardening guides for years because they are the official reference of how to lock down a computer system. And largely they've been ignored by our security point tooling vendors who are programming in random security buttons, right? Because of what's easier, what's marketable. But the reality is some really, really smart people put together these hardening guides with the support of some government money, I understand. But the reality is these are the official guides, and there's not a lot of product capability out there to actually implement these secure configurations. And so I think it's worth calling out that when you say you harden devices, through configuration management that you mentioned there, Zach, this is really a little bit different than your average, EDR or system lockdown tool. And I'm curious, Zach, if you could just call out some of the value, like how is this changing how service providers operate? They're generating money off of this capability, right?
course. And we got to highlight the most recent comment on the LinkedIn. Henry said one thing that I think they kind of disagree with is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Defaults are definitely broke, right, Henry? So
I said that
we
was
should,
the IT mindset, bro. You
the
calm
IT
down here.
mindset. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, defaults are broke. Please change them. All right. Value from the MSP side. I mean, yeah, you're able to create a new revenue stream as an MSP, right? So we're talking very granular here from the technical perspective. We harden workstations, servers, browsers, right? But what in reality is that we're building is a hardening platform, right? Eventually, as we continue to mature and get into, maybe that's application hardening, maybe that's XYZ hardening, right? It's an entire platform that's able to do more than just those few scope things. So as an MSP, when you present that to your clients, you can basically go, hey, we've done, and this could be an existing client, right? Hey, we've done the reactive security stack. We've implemented allow listing, EDR, monitoring, vulnerability scanning. But now we want to take our relationship to the next level. When you trust me with your assets, with your computers, with your applications, they need to be configured. And it's an opportunity for the MSP to even educate their clients on, hey, we understand this is functioning as you expect, but at the end of the day, it may not be as secure as it needs to be, and someone else might be able to get access and do XYZ. So yes, is this a revenue generating thing? Sure. I mean, of course, that's how MSP models work, right? You add a platform and you get an ROI. You don't use it if you don't. But realistically, this is something, I mean, I said it before, it's priority 4 in CIS. This is probably something MSPs and enterprises alike probably should have been doing the whole time. So what we're building is giving every MSP and every partner a chance to go back to the fundamentals and effectively finish that step that was maybe skipped or put on the back burner for a while.
Yeah,
He's so good at what he does.
I've been in the security game a while, and we used to just call this configuration management, right? But it's something that in a large organization, like you'll have multiple people assigned full time to do configuration management, and the way it used to be done was people would be coding up GPOs and these policies and registry, fixes and building these profiles all manually. Which, if you're a large corporation, of course, you can afford to have like multiple people that all they do is write configuration files all day, right? But as a service provider, not only do you not have that dedicated person to write browser config files, but you've got a bunch of clients, right? So it's like, it's not just that you don't have a dedicated person, you also have to cover n number of clients, right? And maybe some of those clients are going to look a little bit different than others. And so being able to actually reach into the depths and be able to twiddle all those knobs without manually writing those settings is pretty valuable. But
yeah, I mean, it's effectively, like we say, we continuously call ourselves this. We are a platform, right? The platform is effectively getting to have a Henry at every MSP, because that's what our platform does, right? It understands the settings, it runs through a learning mode, it makes recommendations, and then it actually performs the remediation by clicking a button. So it's like every MSP having a Henry or a true sysadmin who knows these settings inside and out at every
Just call
single
me
one
a
of your shops,
sysadmin.
or whatever you
Yeah.
want to call yourself, engineer. You're janitor in my mind, brother. You don't have a title. You do everything
That's
that
not
we
entirely wrong.
think.
I'm gonna take
But
a side journey here. Have you guys? This is just in response to your janitor comment. Do you know in formalized InfoSec that the person who twiddles those knobs is actually called the custodian? That's actually
I was
There you go.
close.
formal
I'm a custodian
formal
now.
jargon. Yeah. Anyway,
right.
keep going.
I mean, but yeah,
Sorry,
I mean,
derailed
it's
that.
getting to have the ROI of offering something new, a new line item to bill for, whatever you charge for it. But at the same time, head fry cook and bottle washer. I like what Marty said in the comments. And now getting to say, hey, on top of charging more, it's like we have a whole nother employee we didn't before, because now all of the configuration management that you're kind of doing today, whether you're billing for it or not, you have help desk, you have GPO troubleshooting. Now you're eliminating the need to do that or investing as much time at minimum. And you're getting standardized machines, and you're now billing for it at a profit. So yeah, I mean, hardening, I think, is going to continue to be one of the hottest topics closing out the year. Security posture management, cyber hygiene. I mean, all the big players are saying it. We're the only ones who are doing it at this level.
All right, so I think we need to do some takeaways here. Back to start. Let's go back to start here. We need to be honest about what extensions we're all using, right? And I just like I felt like I was really gutsy there, showing everyone my extensions. I feel like I just like let you in my bedroom closet, but
We don't want to go there, Matt. The extensions are far enough.
The reality is that like this is dirty laundry, right? Like and every engineer thinks their extensions are safe, right? But like you really need to take that critical lens to every single extension and make sure there's a business purpose. And I think those questions earlier about hey, do you think an ad blocker, needs to be on a business machine? And I think that the question is, if you can define that there's business value received by this ad blocker, and there's a case that someone could argue, and someone else agrees with them, yeah, that sounds like a great reason to have an extension. And we just also need to make sure that that is a reputable extension vendor, and there's not maybe a more reputable alternative we should be looking at. And repeat ad infinitum for all the extensions, right? There needs to be a justification. It needs to be safe, right? And we need to be honest that we're talking about every extension, right? And admins are no exception. So that's the first takeaway. The second takeaway that I want to add there is you all probably need some infrastructure for this because this stuff can be difficult to configure. But those are my takeaways. Henry, what do you want to leave people with here?
Grow trees on your browser, and Internet Explorer is the best option. No, I mean, I think you hit it pretty well on the head. And I think the only additional takeaways I have for it are, just some of the stuff that we mentioned prior, of just ensuring that you're doing the right diligence and that everything starts as a process, and then good security is maintaining that process as time goes on and people demand more things. Zach.
You got any takeaways here, loud guy?
Oh man, if you shout enough in the comments, you get to hop on the webinar. That's my takeaway.
That's true too.
I mean, I just got here. I missed the beginning educational part, man. I'm just here to shout. No takeaways for me. Everyone, lock down your configs. Do it manually. Use Senteon. Just look at your configs.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to everyone for coming back for another week here. And I would be remiss not to make sure I shout out next week, which we are going to be having. And I'm always like 2 clicks away here. We're going to be talking about phishing simulations, how to prevent those cyber awareness failures. We have with us next week Ryan Healy-Ogden from ClickArmor and Scott Wright. So they're in the Canadian training space, and I love to shout out to my Canadian friends in the north because they've actually got some really interesting. It's a nice little center of InfoSec up there. There's a few places in the world that are creating InfoSec innovation, and I think some people don't realize that we've got some great innovation coming out of our northern friends there. But in any case. See everyone next time. Subscribe, share, like. Thanks, guys.